Mr. Rainwater.
Hey there, Jow.
Today we're discussing something important. Dare I say, a moral conflict that resides in all artists.
It's the big one, right?
It is the big one. The art of selling out.
Right?
I don't know if I could call it the art of selling out. It's just selling out. But the real question it comes down to is what are you willing to sacrifice from an artistic end in order to nourish yourself financially? I don't know how to
Yeah. No, that's exactly. I've been trying to, I spent a lot of time today trying to figure out, what is selling out even? You know? What do people mean when they say that an artist is sold out? Because
well, if you sell out a venue, that's a great fucking thing.
You want that.
Yeah.
However, every artist also has in the back of their mind sort of a fear that their audience might think they've sold out if they've hit a certain level of success. And it depends on the artist. It depends on what the expectations are towards that artist, right? A more independent type artist, like let's say David Lynch, right? David Lynch makes a Dorito commercial. Has he sold out?
Depends on how that commercial shows up.
How he directs it, you mean?
Yeah, like if it still looks like a David Lynch type thing, if it's what I expect from David Lynch, then I don't think he's sold out.
I personally would like to see a David Lynch directed Dorito commercial because I think he can find the art in a lot of different things, and he could probably find the art. He could find the art of selling out, I think.
And that would make probably a great commercial.
But what you're saying is that there is a possibility where David Lynch directs a commercial, and it's just a very boring corporate-looking commercial, and that would be definitively selling out by your standard.
So I was thinking about the same topic today, much how you mentioned, and I was trying to really kind of define it for myself. And in the last couple of episodes, I've discussed. Well, I think it was that one of the episodes we discussed breaking rules, and it was talking about not actual rules, but rules that are unspoken establishments of mainstream media. And I don't mean media like the news. I mean any kind of art, entertainment, storytelling, that kind of industry. Yeah. It's it's kind of become like a staple where it's there's a token black guy. And now in more modern day, there's always at least one queer character. You know what I mean? It's those unspoken things that everybody's noticing, but nobody's nobody's really addressing. It's almost mandated that it be in there. Do you know what I mean? It feels like it's forced in there for the sake of marketability, for the sake of protection in terms of Twitter. Just to call it like it is. So I think what it boils down to me for selling out really comes to the point where an artist violates the pre-established rules in which they operate by. Does that make sense? If they violate their own rules that they've established in order to cater to what has been, normalized by everyone else, and as you put it, boring, that to me is selling out. Not necessarily cashing in, but selling out.
So in other words, what you're saying is you're defining it by the artist, the integrity of the artist. Selling out would be going against your integrity. So if you were somebody who, I don't know, let's say were fiercely like to make political statements in your movies, and then suddenly after that all your movies are twee indie films about going to coffee shops,
Right. Yeah.
Nothing, no political statements are ever made, it's just it's
it's safe and we're not trying to offend anybody, or the vice versa, where you were just an entertainer before and now all of a sudden you're very anti insert president here in all of, you know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't matter necessarily which way you go, but like all of a sudden you start betraying that. And it opened up a conundrum in my brain. And this is why I opened by talking about a conflict that we wrestle with, because we've talked about in the past, artists, despite having signatures and their own style and all this kind of thing, grow and change.
Yeah.
And the real question is sometimes, like, if you don't have access to money or funding, you know, you have to do things a certain way. But then when you get to a higher level, you have access to more resources. And maybe you want to try, you know, doing CGI in the movie. And it's not the studio saying, hey, we need to have CGI fighter jets. You can't do the miniatures anymore. Maybe it's you just going, I'm tired of filming fucking miniatures, doing stop animation. Like, it's so time consuming. Just do the CGI. Like, I think it's good enough. I think that'll work. Or whatever reason justifies it, you know. An artist will change. And then its loyal fan base that was there before they really got exposed to wider audiences notices that change and doesn't want it to happen. It's kind of like, you know, your parents get divorced and then dad gets a new girlfriend. And it's like, no, you and mom are going to get back together. And like, that's the way it's always going to be. And and no, like, so I struggle with the fact of, like, it's really hard to tell when an artist is changing themselves or changing for someone else.
Great concrete example, Tim Burton. He's the big one, isn't he?
Oh, snap, Rainwater went there.
No, but he's like the big example, because I feel like he's the one artist that, you know, everybody who was like really artsy loved. And then something happened around, I don't know, maybe 2008, 2010, whenever the Willy Wonka movie came out.
Yeah.
That he did. That was the point where it was like, and it's weird because I don't even think everybody started saying he was a sellout, even though what happened was that he just got more money to produce his films.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happened is he made movies that just weren't as popular, and to me didn't seem that good. But I didn't think that those movies were necessarily like what I would think of as selling out. They were just like, oh, we're going to make this Alice in Wonderland movie. You know, we're going to make this Willy Wonka movie. And I think, to me, what I saw, right, where these movies came out after he made, you know, something like Big Fish, which is
his best work, in my opinion.
As far as like a Tim Burton movie goes, it's extremely personal. Very thoughtful, very emotionally intelligent, like all his earlier movies, you know, very impactful. So I could see why, and I could see for myself why I would think those later movies really feel like selling out, because it's none of that, right? It's very commercial. It's very safe. It's very boring, you know?
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people think of selling out as something that's, and I guess this is going back to our original point we're making, right? Is the integrity got broken in some way. It's hard for me to fully place. I don't know if you have thoughts about that, Jow.
It kind of, because the thing about Tim Burton is people like to think that he was a very original guy, but at the start of his career, his style was the original aspect, right?
Yeah.
Because no one had ever really seen that kind of stylization really kind of take hold in feature filmmaking. So when he did Batman and when he did Pee-wee, do you know what I mean? Like, things like that started to kind of make a mark of like, oh, this guy's really visionary. And then he's doing things like Edward Scissorhands, which was an original work. He's doing things like Beetlejuice, which at the time was an original work. Yeah. Then he's doing things like Nightmare Before Christmas, which was, well, he produced it, but his style was definitely all over that thing. But like all of these original type things were drizzled in amongst his existing IP work. And I think that's what people really fell in love with, i.e. Big Fish. And then sometime around Alice in Wonderland, he stopped kind of doing that. I think the last time he did a movie that was quote unquote an original idea was Big Eyes. And I think that was about that was based off a book. No?
Oh, I haven't even seen that movie.
That movie with Amy Adams. I don't remember who else was in it. Somebody plays, who's the guy from Inglourious Bastards? The evil, The Tarantino guy loves the evil Nazi guy.
Oh, Christoph Waltz.
Yes, Christoph Waltz was in it, and he's a painter, and I think his wife Amy Adams is a painter, and she paints these paintings, and then he takes all the credit for them because a woman can't, get the notoriety back in whenever I think it was set. I don't remember how it was received. I feel like
I didn't even hear about the movie. So
I want to say it was received poorly, but I might be wrong about that. I to be honest, I haven't seen the film either. Yeah. But that was the last time I can recall him doing an original work. And I loosely say original because it's not based on like a pop culture type thing. But then you have you've got the Wonka, you've got Dumbo, you got Alice in Wonderland sequels, right? All these kinds of things were just existing IPs, and it became the idea where it's like, oh, he's just going to do whatever the studio wants him to do, and they just want to keep rebooting all this shit that they know about. And there is no more Edward Scissorhands. There is no more Big Fish. There is no more
well, that's a funny thing, too, because what you're describing also, that period of time that, gets seen as like the downfall or as the selling out period, it's really a period where it's just, we want you to do these already established stories, and we want you to do them with your style, quote unquote, right? We want your Tim Burton signature on these movies.
Because just like the IPs themselves is a brand that people are familiar with and will go to the theater for.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I get 100% what you're saying. And it's interesting to me because Tim Burton isn't really doing anything necessarily wrong there as an artist.
But it's a betrayal on the part of the fans who love Nightmare Before Christmas. And let's be honest, that Nightmare Before Christmas, then Edward Scissorhands, and then in a distant third, Beetlejuice, are like the ones that people cling to. And he's not making any more of those. In fact, if you think about it, they're talking about making a sequel to Beetlejuice. And there, that's a continuation of his, I'm just jumping back into an existing IP. Even if he created that IP. I don't know. I don't think he wrote it. But, being the director, he's, tied to it. I'm looking up his IMDb right now. Give me a second.
Sure.
I'm just trying to think of what else he's done lately. Because
I don't know.
It feels like, so Beetlejuice 2 announced. I don't know if I trust that. Oh, he's the executive producer on the Netflix show that's being shot at the moment, Wednesday, which is a television show based around Wednesday Addams from the Addams Family. Then he was, Dumbo, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. That's another book, right? That's a children's book.
Yeah.
Big Eyes, that was 2014. Frankenweenie, 2012. Dark Shadows, that was another one. That one sucked.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah. Alice in Wonderland. Sweeney Todd. I guess you can give him credit for that, but again, it's existing IP.
Yeah.
Corpse Bride. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Big Fish. Planet of the Apes. Don't forget about that one.
That was one that people just kind of...
It didn't have his style.
It didn't at all, and people were willing to let it slide, I think, at that time. Because it kind of came and went. Yeah. Well, okay, before that was Sleepy Hollow. Now, that's one of my favorites. Before that, Mars Attacks. That was a really good one. I love that movie.
Everybody loves Mars Attacks. Everybody loves Sleepy Hollow. Planet of the Apes was a stumble. Big Fish was his, apex. Right. And then from there on out, it's kind of been downhill. Because after Big Fish, it's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Okay, great. Corpse Bride, not as good as Nightmare Before Christmas, right? Everybody, it just didn't happen.
Corpse Bride was unwatchable for me.
Right. So that's a downhill step. Then you've got Sweeney Todd. That's divisive in itself because a musical is just, I don't care if it's horror. I don't care if it's musical. That is a very niche fan base, a horror musical. Right.
You
really got to be swinging for reaching for a deep audience there. Alice in Wonderland, again, existing IP. Dark Shadows, again. Frankenweenie feels like they're scraping the bottom of the barrel because he had done that as his original, before Batman I think Frankenweenie was like his short that got him noticed. And then they made that into a feature. Big Eyes felt like they were trying to dip back into the Big Fish kind of category. I'm looking at Big Eyes now. What is it? What's it got as a... It's got a 7.0 on IMDb, and that's not bad.
Yeah, that's not bad at all.
That's
well, and so that's what's interesting is how much can you blame the artist when the entire industry is selling out?
True. I mean, it's hard because part of me wonders how much sway does he have?
Sure.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and that's the other thing is like, if Tim Burton has the credentials to get away with that, why doesn't he use it? And I think that's my biggest problem. And then I'm looking at this. All right, so since Frankenweenie, which let's not call that an original IP because he was remaking his original short. The last time he did something quote unquote original, Big Fish was a book, no?
I don't know. It might have been.
I think it was. It's going to take too much time to look up. Planet of the Apes remake, Sleepy Hollow adaptation of a short book. Mars Attacks was, let's call that his last original work. No?
Right. Well, technically it was based on like a collectible card thing.
Was it really? Jesus Christ.
Which was, when I found out about that, I was like, well, that's an incredible, like, how do you even connect those dots?
Can we count Ed Wood as an original?
Ed Wood is, I think, technically original, even though it's biographical in nature, right?
Yeah.
But it's a story. It's an original story woven from biographical facts, right?
We'll call that an original thing. We'll say Ed Wood, which was 1994, and if we don't count Ed Wood, Edward Scissorhands would be the last original thing that he did, which is 1990. So everything he's done since then has been an adaptation or an adaptation of an existing IP, whether it's a book or his original shorts or like an existing property of some sort. Because he didn't direct Nightmare Before Christmas either. So that we're not really counting that. He's an executive producer on it, but he's not the director of it.
I got you.
So I think what it was is I think the audience started feeling betrayed that he didn't do anything original anymore. And I think we've talked about this in the past. The shtick got old.
Yeah.
It's like once you've figured out what Tim Burton does, you know what you're getting, and it's like, oh, all right. Like there's no more to it. So then that goes to the question. Selling out would be when you change to suit the thing, but if you don't change, you get stale. So it's almost like that conundrum of you can't win.
Right. I mean, so for me, the artist who really bucks that idea has always been David Bowie, who would change constantly and somehow, despite that, never really hit a note that was disingenuous. Somehow. Now, he might have had albums that were not as good as other albums. He might have had, like, especially his later career, he had albums where people didn't really listen to them as much. It was maybe not as original a sound, but I will regularly listen to like Heathen or even Reality, which is not that great of an album, but even then it still has a compendium of his thoughts in that time, and none of it ever seems just lazy. It never seems lazy. It never seems trite. It never seems like he's just trying to phone it in to get an album done. It always feels like he's showing up at the desk for work. Like he's showing up and doing his job to be an artist.
Yeah.
And that is sort of talking about Tim Burton. That's sort of the difference that I'm seeing between somebody maybe like David Bowie versus Tim Burton, is that Tim Burton was just phoning in, basically, in these later movies. Like he's just showing up for work and getting the check.
Be that ass. but I'm gonna be. Has Tim Burton ever been anything more than a style?
Well, I mean, so what do you like about Big Fish as a movie? Is it a stylistic choice or is it, what
No,
is it?
it's the story. I mean, he didn't write it, and that's
Sure.
part of the thing. But the story was very heartfelt, and the idea of well, I'm a sucker for any kind of a story that has a kind of relation between a father and a son.
Yeah.
So that's why like Batman Begins is my favorite Batman movie because there's a father-son dynamic. A Goofy movie, father-son dynamic. Godfather, father-son dynamic. Like that kind of thing always kind of hits me to my core. So the fact that Big Fish has that father-son dynamic was really elevated for me, and it felt like the most emotional of his works. Like a lot of Tim Burton's movies, while they have energy, don't necessarily have emotion. They feel kind of void of any kind of real emotion exploration. And for me, that felt like it was just intrinsically there in the script.
Yeah.
So it's not like he had to direct it out of it. I mean, he has some pretty good actors in there that could probably just hit those notes in their sleep, especially when they had a script that was offering them that opportunity. So you look at it and you see Tim Burton's style on it, but I have very rarely seen directing or performances come out of those things or innovative. What if I asked you right now, and I could probably do this for any filmmaker, and you like any notable filmmaker, and you could probably give me a solid answer, right? I could ask you this same question about Michael Bay, and you could give me an answer. But I bet you're going to have a hard time answering this for Tim Burton. What is your favorite Tim Burton shot?
That is a hard question to answer. I can think of ones that come to mind most immediately. Like I can think of the opening and closing shots from Ed Wood because they're so unique to his other movies. Like there's these very like obviously prop sort of B-movie sort of scenes, and it's intentionally done that way to set up what you're getting into, right?
Yeah.
And I think of that as such a good storytelling mechanic because it sets the atmosphere, it sets the mood. Because you go into the movie automatically with a bit of a wink, basically, or this is going to be funny in some way, even though a lot of what happens in the movie isn't necessarily like the story itself isn't necessarily funny. It's tragic,
right? If
you think about like what how Ed Wood's life went, but the way that the movie's done, it's extremely hilarious, and it's a way of both mockingly appreciating a director who may have made one of the worst movies ever, right?
Yeah.
And that was kind of the idea. But so what for you, did you have a further point in that question?
The point that I'm making is that there's a lot of visual style in terms of the construction. So like the way he'll construct a house, like how it's so angular, like the production aesthetic, that kind of stuff is very typical of him. But you can't tell me like the way he moves the camera or the way he composes the frame or anything like that. Nothing jumps out about that. So like that's a directing thing. Even though, yes, that's cinematography, the director of photography should probably handle that. But it's like directors do have a style. And then you look at things like acting, right? Yeah. So you could say in a Christopher Nolan movie, so-and-so gives a performance like this, or in a Tarantino movie, so-and-so gives a performance like that. Like they give performances that they don't give anywhere else. In a Tim Burton movie, it doesn't feel like he's necessarily directing actors. He's letting actors just do whatever they want. Like that's one of my things that I think like Johnny Depp really appreciates about it is like he's very hands-off on how Johnny handles the character. And that's very freeing and, allows an artist of an actor to explore their ideas and do what they want to do. And most of the times when you have somebody like Johnny Depp, Martin Landau, like those guys are going to hit the numbers that they want because they're fucking pros and know what they're doing. But, you know, if you see Johnny Depp in a Christopher Nolan movie, he's going to give a Christopher Nolan performance. If you see Johnny Depp in a Tim Burton movie, you don't know what the fuck you're going to get. Like, there's no assigned style to that. So I'm not inclined to believe that Tim Burton actually directs the actors. I'm not inclined to believe Tim Burton actually directs the writer or the cinematographer or anything like that.
Saying at that point, because what you're saying is what Tim Burton's bringing to the table is a visual style and a visual language, but not even a visual language in the sense of, because you're making comparison to Michael Bay, right? And Michael Bay's visual language is more in the kind of shots that he picks. He has the very
slow moving, like the circling
rotating
around. Yeah. But you see that shot and you know it's a Michael Bay movie.
Yeah.
Right? You see some crass, childish humor and you know it's a Michael Bay movie.
Like, or compared to like a Wes Anderson film where it's like straight on, very
lockdown camera, a static shot. Absolutely. Tarantino, you know what I mean? Like you got some like crazy tracking shot or something, you know what I mean? Like the editing in a Scorsese movie, like all these kinds of things are directorial notes. The only thing that stands out to me in a Tim Burton movie is the production aesthetic.
Well, I will say, though, there's a point to be made there, though. And I think part of the reason that Tim Burton does not have a particular shot style is because so much of his stories that he tells are also very much lodged into genre. So he's doing sort of I think there's a certain amount of chameleon, like just picking up what is the genre of this film and going with that, rather than I'm going to insert like some overt style to how the movie's going to be shot, if that makes sense. So like Mars Attacks, for example, it's a sci-fi movie. It's a B movie kind of thing. So all the shots are going to be picked in such a way to evoke that idea. And it's like that's part of what makes that movie so interesting and so fun to watch, is because it's adeptly done to be this really offbeat and also in a way awkward movie where it's not even really intended to be a comedy if you just watch it straight on. Like I've watched that movie High and I was just like, why is this? I can't figure out why this movie was funny, because I'm watching it right now and it's like terrifying. Like all the people in this movie are horrible. Like none of them are redeemable in any way. And of course that's the humor, right? Like that's the point of the movie, is that it's a satire. Right. And it's like a very darkly comic satire. And in order to accomplish that, you have to shoot it in a way where it is you're being very matter of fact about what you're doing. And you're not trying to be cheeky about it. You're not doing too much winking at the camera. You're just letting it play out like a B movie would play out. But because you get into the atmosphere of it, it starts to sort of set in. That's the best way I could possibly describe Mars Attacks. And also use that as an example in regards to how I think that Tim Burton is approaching choosing shots in a movie.
Okay. Now, all of that said, what was the last Tim Burton movie you watched? Like the most recent?
The most recent was actually Mars Attacks.
not like most recent in your life, like the latest like produced movie. Yeah, like which one was the last one that you saw? New one.
It was probably Big Fish. I might have seen Willy Wonka. I saw some of it, but I don't remember it well enough to really say that I've seen it.
But would you say that he lost a lot of what you talked about there about the B movie aesthetic and the B movie approach when he did these, because there's nothing for him to rip off now?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I have vague impressions of having watched that Alice in Wonderland movie, and it looked like the most generic.
Right.
It was the most generic movie I'd ever seen. You know? Because
it's just he's got his quirky style, like his visual aesthetic, but he doesn't have anything else to hang it on.
Yeah.
And that to me is what the problem was, is that he was an illustrator and somehow he became a director. And to me, his strength is in visualization. I think he could be a great, like a production designer under somebody else. And I think that would be great. And the same thing applies, in my opinion, towards Zack Snyder. I think Zack Snyder is a decent, got a good eye for frame composition and such. I don't want to say he's got like a marketing eye where he can make a shot that will look fucking amazing in a trailer or a TV spot or some kind of advertisement. But when it comes to directing the actors for an emotional thing or the script or anything like that, Zack Snyder sucks. It's just the truth. But he comes from a commercial background. That was his job, was to get, cool shots of cars. Now he gets cool shots of superheroes. And he's not an artist in terms of like a storyteller. He's just like an advertiser. And that's why when you watch a trailer for a Zack Snyder movie, you go, oh, that might be pretty good. Then you're sitting in the theater 45 minutes. You're like, nothing's fucking happened. Like, do something, make me feel something, make me like somebody. I can't. And it's just not happening. So I could never say that Zack Snyder sold out because he came from advertising. So when he puts a Dunkin' Donuts building in the movie for Superman to break up and blow up, that's right within his
Zack
wheelhouse.
Snyder's a funny one. I think everybody's sort of thrown their hands up in regards to expecting him to like change, right?
Right. Yeah.
Even though there's been talks about him doing like a cinematic version, or he stated that he would want to do a cinematic version of Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead. Something I would be fascinated to watch because I don't know how that would turn out. Like how you get Zack Snyder to do a movie about an architect who just wants to make buildings, which is literally just, that's pretty much the story of the book. But how he would make that into an interesting movie, I would love to see, because that would be him going out of a comfort zone.
Yes, and I think that's what we really are getting at, is that artists, it's not about, so selling out to me is not about changing or avoiding the sellout thing. So an artist can change, but I think it's more in a sake for exploration. You know what I'm saying? Like it's about which direction you choose to go. So for example, an artist that is a filmmaker now, who I do not think has sold out and is doing something very interesting that I can't wait to see. I was talking about it earlier today on Twitter. Rob Zombie is doing the fucking Monsters movie. What? Like, you think about Rob Zombie and his whole filmography up until this point about redneck trash people cussing and doing sexual things and being overly violent and very dirty, dingy things and, very rough, dirty cinematography and lighting and all this kind of stuff. Nobody's washed their hair in 6 weeks. Like, it's like trashiest of trash. Yeah. And then you have this like 60s, like, satire of the Universal monsters done to like complete camp, and they say, well, it's some monster shit, let's make Rob Zombie do it. And that's a complete style clash, and I want to know what the fuck's gonna happen. I want to know if Rob Zombie does, because either way it's a win-win. If Rob Zombie does his Rob Zombie style, that's the monsters being adapted into the Rob Zombie style. And if that's the the monsters in their classic style, that's Rob Zombie adapting to a classic style. So it's a win-win situation in my mind, because either way, I don't know what to expect. It's completely off the wall. Yeah. And it could suck, but the opportunity for it to be entertaining, to me, or at least interesting, is much higher than it is for it to fail. Absolutely. And that to me doesn't feel like selling out. He's doing an IP, right? What has Rob Zombie done? He's done the Halloween franchise, and now he's doing the Monsters, right? So like, it's kind of like he's starting to follow in Tim Burton's footsteps, where he's going towards the more existing IP stuff, but he's doing it differently and in a way that might be interesting.
Here's the irony too, thinking about it. I didn't think the Wachowskis sold out when they made a Speed Racer movie. But I do feel like the Wachowskis sold out when they made Matrix Resurrections.
Did you watch Matrix? Did you watch it? We haven't talked about this. I feel like we should talk about this. Now, wait, did you think the whole thing was bad, or did you think
Like the whole movie?
Yeah.
I didn't. Okay. Here's my thing about that movie. There were parts that were interesting if they would have focused more on those parts.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of stuff dealing with how the nature of things have evolved in the world outside the Matrix. About how like the machines have changed and how some of them evolved and stuff like that. That's interesting. I'd like to see more of that.
Then it turned into bam, bam, punch, punch, kick, kick.
Yeah. Well, not even. Here's the thing: is the bam, bam, punch, punch, kick, kick stuff all sucked. It just wasn't interesting. Yeah. It didn't even have like a Wachowski signature to it, because something that made the first Matrix movie interesting is they did really cool like action movie stuff, like Bullet Time. Before then, really, I think
it didn't exist.
The only thing that I can think of, I can't remember if the Max Payne games came out before or after Matrix, but they were pretty close to each other. Point being, like, they had basically invented a special effect idea,
right,
that became iconic for the movie series. And there's no like iconic addition to it, right? There's like some meta stuff that's kind of winky and interesting, but it doesn't really go anywhere. And at the end of the movie, I just felt like I just watched the same movie over again, but with some additions here and there. So it just didn't really, to me, that feels, even with the meta stuff, it feels like selling out, because it's like, oh, you couldn't just make a new story or something, do something different, because they have plenty, like they've had plenty of like original ideas that they've done in the past.
Yeah.
Even ones that haven't been super successful, but that I like Cloud Atlas is a movie that a lot of people don't like. I like it because it's ambitious. It's a fucking ambitious movie.
You also like The Last Jedi, so
yeah. No, I like ambitious. I like ambitious ideas, even if they happen to fail. I am more interested to see somebody attempt something and fail at it than attempt nothing new and fail at it, which is what Matrix Resurrections was.
But see, now let's talk about that, because that's an interesting point, because the idea of selling out is, in my mind, being safe, right? Because it's a bad business bet to try something new. Right. So it's to be safe is to not grow, or to do the things that are. So I guess the idea of selling out is to be safe, right? Because that falls into, that checks both the boxes, where it does the mainstream thing that's already being done by everybody else, but it also limits the artist to not grow out of even out of their own style.
And that's what's so interesting about Speed Racer is that, like I was saying, by all technical definitions, you'd think that was selling out. We're going to go with an IP. We're going to, this seems kind of safe. Really, it wasn't safe, because they were doing something nobody's really done visually for a movie. And it, by all accounts, if somebody had described that to me, I would go, how's this going to work? There's no way you can do this. And they did it, They
did it better than Ang Lee did it.
Yeah.
Because Ang Lee tried to do comic book panels in his Hulk movie, and that didn't work.
Yeah, it was horrible.
But the way that the Wachowskis did it in Speed Racer, where they had like the different panels in the frame at the same time, and things transitioning and stuff like that, like that worked in that movie. The way they were able to figure out how to make it work, and that to me wasn't safe. That was new. That was explorative. Yeah. That was that was what it worked. What movies have the Wachowskis done since, or just before the most recent Matrix?
I think before that was Cloud Atlas. I can't think of any other movies that they had done.
They really haven't been doing much, correct?
No, but I think also there's been stuff going on in their personal lives.
Okay.
So, like, they've just been going through a lot of changes in a whole lot of different ways. And if this is based on something I heard in regards to Lana talking about her personal life, like losing a parent, and
oh, that's right. They just recently lost like both their parents, right, or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. And so part of it was for Lana, because I don't think the other sibling was involved with this movie.
Lily was not, or it was one of the other, but it was only one of them.
Yeah, And so, as I recall, Lana talked about it as, oh, well, I can come back to Neo and Trinity because they're, and it made sense to me. I can really relate to this as like a writer, like when you have a character or set of characters that are really like comforting to you,
Yeah.
you want to return to it. And so, like, yeah, I get that. The movie's still horrible though. Like, as much as I hate to say it, but it's like, hopefully Lana enjoyed the experience of making it though.
It's like getting back, getting paid to go back to camp with your friends.
Right,
And
exactly.
I mean, hey, if in 10 years Digits becomes a sleeper hit and, they were like, hey, we'll give you 50 million to go make a Digits sequel, I would have to think it over, since the relationships that I had with the people that made that movie with me are quite strained at the moment, if existent at all. But like, the idea of going back and redoing it with like friends and stuff is very appealing. And if it's like, just like how they said in the Matrix Resurrections, where it's like, well, Warner Brothers is making it one way or the other, and you can either get paid to do it and see your friends and hang out and have a good time and try to do some good, or not make $1 and watch it crash and burn regardless.
Right,
Like,
right.
Obviously it's the lesser of two evils,
that is
but
the other part of it too, right? And that's the uncomfortable part is you gotta make a paycheck, right?
and that comes down to the selling out aspect that we should have been talking about earlier, but we all have to eat.
Yeah, exactly.
We all have to pay for college loans, and in my case, my kids' future college loans and health care and keeping roof over your head. All that kind of stuff starts coming into play. So yeah, you got to do stuff for the money, and it sucks, and it really does. But like, I tell people this all the time. Like, I got to do wedding videos and city council meetings because that's what's funding me to get new equipment. That's what's going to pay the actors to be on set for 2 weeks for me to make Haunted. Like,
Right.
You got to eat your vegetables in order to get your dessert. So yeah, it's kind of part of the process of being an artist is selling out. And if you're a smart artist, what you'll do when you eat your vegetables is save some of that money, right? And start investing it in yourself to do those things. And if you are not just taking random shots for the shot of it, like if you really are trying to think through, you have to be half business person. And if you can do that, you can start standing on your own where you don't have to make those sacrifices. You can just continuously pump out original content that makes money and prove that point. But at some point, it's the only valid version of paying your dues that I believe in. Like, I don't believe in like being on a film set to give somebody coffee. Like, oh, go do this or go do lockdown. You don't learn a goddamn thing doing lockdown on a film set. Like they say, oh, it's a learning experience. No, you're standing there and you're telling people that they can't go somewhere because you're filming something in secret. It's bullshit. Like, it's just taking advantage of people for the sake of saving money. I don't believe in that kind of paying dues. I do believe that in order to prove your worth, you do need to be good at all times. And that includes doing things you don't want to do. Do you know what I'm saying? So like, if a studio came to me and said, Jow, we want you to make a Batman movie. And I have long said, I never want to make a Batman movie, simply because I'm such a huge fan of a Batman movie that making a Batman movie would ruin a Batman movie for me. Like, I would miss out on getting to see a Batman movie because I made it. Yeah. And if they said, hey, we want you to make a Batman movie. And I was, I don't really know. There's some other stuff I want to do that's more original. And they said, hey, you make a Batman movie for us and we'll greenlight the original one. Then I got to start weighing the consequence. You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, if it'll get that done. And that's one of the things that I liked about Christopher Nolan was, after Dark Knight, he didn't really want to do another Batman movie. There was kind of, I don't know, unless he was negotiating in public, which I don't know. It was entirely possible. He didn't want to do another Batman movie. But they came back and they said, well, you did Prestige after Batman Begins. How about you do Dark Knight for us? And then we'll let you make Inception. And then he did that. And then they said, hey, how about you make another Batman movie for us? And then we'll let you make Dunkirk, and that's kind of how he got around doing it. And Scorsese talks about this, where it's like one for you, one for me. So he had to do, a movie that they wanted them to do so he could do Silence. And that's kind of like the mentality about it. And I believe as a filmmaker or any kind of artist, you need to be smart with your money. You got to invest in yourself. They always say don't put your own money in your own art. And I think that's bullshit, because if
I don't know how else you're supposed to do it.
Yeah, if you're worth your salt, you'll make it work. You just can't take it for granted. That's what I think a lot of artists fall through is that they get a little higher on their own supply. And that's the thing where you got to hold on to a little bit of that depression and doubt where you're like, I suck. Is this good? Because that, I think, keeps you humble and working hard. And that keeps you from being a sellout. Because I don't think Tim Burton, I wish Tim Burton did a one for you, one for me. If he had said to them, I'll do Alice in Wonderland, but you got to let me make this weird, wonky horror movie that I want to make, something that would have like turned out like Malignant. I'm shocked as shit. Did you see Malignant?
I haven't seen Malignant.
Okay,
yet.
If you get a chance to see Malignant, please take a chance to see Malignant, because I know damn well, even though it's never been reported anywhere by anybody, James Wan, who's known for doing like the Saw movies, the Conjuring movies, Insidious, like these horror movies, I know for a fact when he negotiated to do Aquaman, which is a vast departure of his previous work, it was a one for you, one for me type situation, because when you see Malignant, it's a horror movie, but it's a horror movie unlike all the other horror movies that he's made. It's a complete left turn. And in order to get something like that made, he had to have done a favor for the studio. And that to me explains why he did Aquaman. So I guess the part of me is like, I really want Tim Burton to fight for some kind of originality in his life. I really want him to go, no, I'll do 6 Dumbo movies and 3 Alice in Wonderlands, but you got to let me do these 4 movies about, the next Ed Wood that, nobody really knows about or appreciates, or let me do a movie about Vincent Price or something in his wheelhouse that he enjoys or loves. I don't feel like Tim Burton loves anything that he's done in the last couple of years. Who the fuck is a fan of Dumbo? Serious. Like
I can't. I mean, I haven't even seen that movie yet, so I can't really speak on it. Like, it could be. I don't know. It could be good. Have you seen it?
Through osmosis, my wife has had it on. She's a big Disney person, but even she was like, "Well, this is kind of flat and boring."
Okay,
like,
so it was a lot. It was a lot like those other live action renditions of. Okay.
Yeah, where the CGI robs a lot of it.
Yeah.
Let's be honest with us. It's the George Lucas. It's the prequel trilogy effect, where you can assign a lot of blame to direction, the writing, the acting, but one of the things intrinsically embedded in every human being's eye is to look at something generated through a computer, and for the most part, for the last few decades, your brain knows it's not real.
Yeah.
And that ruins the movie experience. The whole point of the first thing they taught us in film school was the persistence of motion, I believe it was called, where you're not watching anything actually move in a movie. Or even right now on this video screen right now, you're watching a series of frames in an order that give the illusion that something is moving.
Right.
You're being tricked. You're being fooled. When you're looking at CGI things, your brain knows the entire time. You're not being tricked. You're not being fooled. And it's not interesting to look at. When you see something like a Unreal Engine, where you're like, I can't tell. It's a little bit of 50-50 where it's like, oh, this is fooling me, but I know better by now.
When the things that stick out that don't fool you, though, the things that don't fool you really stick out.
Right.
You know what
distracting,
I mean?
right?
Yeah,
Isn't it?
It's extremely distracting.
The whole point of any kind of, and I try to explain this to people when I'm critiquing scripts and they have things that don't need to be there. I try to explain it to them. The whole point of you as a storyteller is removing distractions. I don't need to see this. I don't need to hear this. I don't need to witness this. I don't need to know this. Yep. All of these distractions are clouding up what your story is about. They're making it uninteresting, because it's like a lecture where if you were sitting in a math lecture and you're 6 years old and your physics teacher is trying to explain to you, E = mc squared, 30 seconds into that as a 6-year-old, you're not going to understand what's happening and you give up. That's just what human beings intrinsically do. When we don't understand something, we just say, fuck it, I give up. Like, I tried, it didn't work.
Yeah.
And when that happens, when you have distractions in a story and I can't figure out what the hell's going on, that's what equates to boredom, where it's like, I can't get invested in this because I don't know what to invest in. I don't know what matters and I don't know what doesn't. What am I supposed to be focusing on? Everything is confusing me. So when you're looking at a film, like a film frame, and there's tons of CG shit going on, you're like, well, I don't know what matters. I don't care that 3 planes are blowing up and there's smoke in the air and the guy's running this way and shooting a gun and this and that. What am I supposed to be looking at? Yeah. There's a technique that they do in cinematography called, oh God, what is it called? Fuck. Split diopter. Split diopter. So when you're looking at a movie, or like, you understand how a lens works, correct? When you have something in focus and then the other stuff is out of focus?
You might have to go a little bit into more detail in regards to how that works.
But like, you've looked at something where something is fuzzy in the background and something is crisp in the foreground, correct?
Yeah, right.
And the idea is, well, I'm supposed to be looking at what is in crisp in focus.
Sure.
What out of focus doesn't matter.
Yeah.
There's a weird attachment, like a filter that you can put on a film lens, where you can put two things in focus that are in the same amount of focus. So even if you were in, like me in my room right now, I'm in focus, while you can read the letters on the poster behind me that say terror, right? They are slightly and very, very slightly more out of focus than I am.
Sure.
So that way your brain is able to pick up on that and know that you're supposed to be looking at me. Split diopter on a lens allows me and that poster to be in the same exact focus. And when you see it in a film, your brain gets pulled out and you're like, oh, both of these things are in focus, but they shouldn't be. Like,
it's been a huge problem for special effects for a long time, because special effects artists have completely ignored the fact that things in the background disappear over time, and so you see.
Yeah.
I don't know why they haven't figured that out either, because this is like
haze. Yeah,
it's painting
like atmosphere.
101. It's fucking, if you've done any research into Renaissance painting, like, they figured it out.
Vanishing points, bitch.
Yeah, exactly. They figured it out centuries ago. Like, why can't you figure this out? And so anyway, it is for sure an issue. It has for a long time been an issue. I think it's gotten better. Not necessarily 100%. I mean, if Moonfall is any indication.
And I was going to bring that up too. Do you think Roland Emmerich has sold out, or do you think he was ever?
I don't think he ever bought in. So I mean, it's hard to. I don't know. I guess like Stargate and Independence Day were such good movies to me that everything else after just seems like whatever. You know,
like he sold out.
Yeah, like, I think with him, I kind of gave up on him years ago, and his track record was like 2 movies for me. Yeah. So it's not like Tim Burton, where he had a huge track record. You know, and Tim Burton had such a big track record that it becomes disappointing over time, right? And that is, you know, ultimately, or the same with the Wachowskis, where it's like, they had such a big track record that it becomes disappointing, where it's like, well, we're going to do another Matrix movie. I'm like, come on, please, no.
And nobody was asking for it. That was the big takeaway. Is like, everybody was like,
well, once again, that's, that may be more representative of the industry right now than it is of any particular director, because how many original movies have come out in the last 5 years?
I was having this debate with someone on Twitter the other day, and their big thing was, well, the studios and the financiers won't put money into anything other than existing IPs. That's why we just keep getting reboots and da-da-da-da-da. To which I understand. I already gave my rant about the veggies and the wedding videos and all that kind of stuff. Like, I get why they're doing that. However, as a person themselves who is making a movie later this year, not based on an existing IP, because I don't have rights or money to buy rights to something.
Sure.
I acknowledge that the studio system does that. I acknowledge that, but I also say, I'm making money. I'm prioritizing money. I'm earmarking money that I am making to make something original.
Yeah.
Once I make that original thing, there are more distribution platforms now than there ever was in the history before.
Yeah,
so the real question is, are studios at fault for all of the remake shit that keeps coming out, or have artists given up?
Yeah, are artists taking easy money?
Are they selling out? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think that it's a point that you're probably right on, you know.
At this point in time, in my financial situation, which is not great at the moment, okay, it's doable. Like, I can live this way and take care of my family. It's fine. But in terms of like being successful in life or whatever, it's not great. Yeah. At this point in my life, I could create my own Roku channel, Rainwater, my own Roku channel, and put it on the platform. I can host things that I make myself on a server in my computer, in my office, in my house, that could be seen in Dubai, that could be seen in China, that can be seen in Australia. All I have to do is make it and promote it, and that's it. And the big takeaway is make sure it's good, right? Like, it's receivable by audiences, like they enjoy it. That's all that I have to do. So the question bogs my mind is, why the fuck aren't these millionaires who have tons of money doing it? Like, I understand, like, the one excuse that I have that I think that they don't is I don't have the time at the moment, right? Because I have to work those wedding videos and stuff because that's how I'm paying bills to keep a roof over my head. They have millions of dollars. Yes, that pays for the mansion roof over their head, but do they really need the mansion? Can they just buy a regular house and prioritize their money accordingly? And the question, it comes down to that.
All these people aging Gen Xers who are just
sitting on their money.
Phoning it in.
Or go fucking give that money to me. Give that money to somebody else. Like, stop complaining that there's nothing original being made. It comes back to that thing where it's like, don't put your own money into a thing. That's that same shit where people are like, oh, no one knows what it takes to make a great movie. We just do shit and see what works. I firmly do not believe that. I believe that there is a way to science the shit out of it. And I do believe that there's a difference between science and art. And I don't want to be cliche and formula, but I think that there is a way to work out how to make great movies.
Oh, and we live in an age where you don't have to go to art college anymore to learn all the tricks of the trade. You can just go on YouTube or just search on the internet or buy a book from Amazon. You can find everything you need.
It's hilarious that you say that because I had somebody roll up in my DMs yesterday asking me for filmmaking advice. And I literally said to them, you can learn more on YouTube and books than I will ever have learned in my 4 years at an expensive private art school. And that's the truth, because I have learned from books and YouTube videos more than I learned at art school. And that's the God's honest truth. Like, I really wish I could go back in time, and I tell this to people all the time. I would not have gone to art school simply because of the debt that it put me in terms of the opportunities that it really didn't open for me, and it didn't really give me what I needed to get where I am today. Everything that I have, like, I know when I make some movie that's going to be a hit or something, that fucking SCAD's going to come calling, oh, he's an alumni. And I'm going to be like, bitch, it's been 10 years that I had to learn all this shit outside of your walls to get where I'm at now. Like, don't try and hang your hat on me now. You were not returning my calls.
Or will you sell out and show up to the lectures, Jow?
I'm just saying, but wait, what did you say?
No, I was just joking. Are you going to sell out and show up to the SCAD lectures and be like, when they acknowledge you finally?
They would absolutely give me one of the nominee of the year award or whatever at the SCAD Film Fest or some shit like that. And I don't, to be honest with you, it feels like the same reason I would not want to go to the Oscars if I ever was, so fortunate to be nominated for something like that. You don't want me there. Because I would be the guy at the podium that drops the Oscar on the ground and says, fuck this shit. Thanks, but no thanks.
That is hilarious because I've actually thought about this a lot. If that situation ever happens to me with SCAD and they're like, hey, we want you to come to Norris Hall for, helping our comic students. I'm like, sure. If you're going to pay for it, I'm going to show up.
You're not going to like what I have to say.
Every portfolio interview, my first question is going to be, can you afford this college? And if the response is no, I'm going to say, all right, let me give you the best advice anybody's ever going to give you now.
Leave.
Just leave. You're going to learn everything you need to learn outside of this place. Nothing against the teachers here. They're all great. But you don't need that debt. You don't need it. Just leave.
Yeah, you're going to be worse buying materials as it is. Like, if I could go back in time, I would say, you know what, take out a loan. Buy the camera, buy the editing equipment, and a couple of books, and read a fucking book, Andrew. Like, that would be my advice to myself, because I hate reading books. But now I've come to the point where I don't read books. I will get a book. I will look at a chapter that interests me in the index, and I will go to that chapter, and I'll just kind of thumb through it like I'm reading like an article online.
Yeah.
Just to get ideas about what I'm supposed to be understanding. Then I will take my camera and try and do it. And then I'll go back to the book, try and kind of figure out what they were trying to say a little bit more, like weighing the understanding versus the experience. And I would just keep trying to balance that until I finally understand what it is, because, there's no one way to learn and there's no one way to teach, and everybody does in both in different ways. So the idea of a teacher teaching a class is kind of, it's archaic, because teachers teach differently and people learn differently, and it's going to work for some and work for others. And you don't really know what's going to work. But for me, I can watch one YouTube video and go, I don't understand how this guy's getting to this result. And then I can watch a different YouTube video on the same subject, same, thing that I'm trying to learn. And then it'd be like, oh, this guy explains it more. Look, and you got that shot. Now I understand that this happens like this.
But that's the thing, is what YouTube is offering is what no college experience can ever offer, which is the ability to pick and choose your teachers willingly, right? To have the sort of flexibility where you can show up for class, go, nah, this professor's not working for me, I need to find another one. Right. And instead of what usually happens is like, well, if that professor doesn't work, it's something wrong with you, not with the professor. And it's like, actually, no. Different teaching styles work for different people. And that is like what the internet in general, not just YouTube, but like the internet in general actually allows for people, is to have something that actually fits their particular learning style. And
it's not the bullshit, oh, Professor R's class is filled. You have to wait till someone else drops out in order to get out of Professor Q's class. And it's like, I'm wasting time here. Like, this is not what I want to do. So, like, I wish I could go back in time and give myself that advice. But, so, it comes down to this where it's, I don't know how we got on this subject, but the idea of selling out to me is really comes down to artists who have given up. They've given up on exploration. Sure. They've given up on risks. They've given up on chances. They've given up on themselves. They bought in on established falsehoods that have been, that are business falsehoods that have been backed by business mindset, where, you know what I mean? Like, people are trying to protect their money. The fucking suits that control money, whether it's in comics or film or whatever it may be, they don't give a shit about putting out a good product. They give a shit about making the money. And I don't mean that like they're all about money. I'm saying they're all about protecting the money.
Right.
Like,
because
that's their job.
They're investing in an artist and they expect returns.
Right.
And there is an expectation that on certain artists are going to lose, but there's also an expectation that on certain artists are going to hit big. So...
But these fuckers don't know how to budget accordingly. Look at the budget for Moonfall. Right?
Yeah, sure.
$140 million for a February opening on Roland Emmerich, who has not turned in a hit in 2 decades.
There's a bigger topic at hand in that whole thing, because a lot of the funders of that movie were
international, weren't they?
Right. Tencent being one of them, and I don't entirely know what their expectations were. I feel like the idea was they were expecting to make money off of it, or it's a vanity project. You you're somebody with a lot of money. You stick your name to a big, a
Yeah.
big American movie.
Yeah.
That's advertisement.
Yeah.
And
And
anyway,
I've met plenty of those schmucks in the film industry who just have this idea they haven't thought through, but they're sure it's going to be a hit because of this was a hit and that was a hit and this,
Sure.
and they look at it in those terms and they don't look at it for what it is and what it needs to be.
Yeah.
Like if Moonfall was a completely schlocky, I'm willing to bet that majority of Moonfall is taken as seriously as possible. Correct?
Oh yeah, that's what makes it so hilarious.
Right. But if you had put someone in there, if you had made it not necessarily like a comedy, but if you had mocked this concept from within, like if you look at Independence Day, the ridiculous things that happen in there and the way, Bill Pullman takes things seriously, Robert Loggia takes things seriously, like they're very serious characters. But Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum are the main fucking characters of that movie, and they are pretty much mocking everything that's going on around them. Jeff Goldblum especially, like having that kind of that viewpoint of how ridiculous is this? And that wasn't in because the rest of the audience is like, yeah, this is ridiculous. Okay, at least it's being acknowledged. I'll go for the ride. But when you have people taking it straight the entire way, yeah, you can get a bad B movie out of it where you're laughing at it, but that's a very niche audience. Most people don't want that. Most people want to connect to the movie. So, I feel bad for the people that put in the movie, but at the same time, I know they're dumb. I know that they weren't thinking it through.
This is what's really funny too, though, is that movie in comparison to maybe a lot of other movies that have come out. That movie in comparison to Matrix Resurrections. Even though Moonfall is a shot-by-shot Roland Emmerich film, and by that I mean it had the same way that Michael Bay has the same beats in every Transformers movie.
Yep.
Roland Emmerich has the same beats in every Roland Emmerich movie.
Yep.
Despite all of that, it still felt more original than Matrix Resurrections. Just because of the whole ridiculous concept of like the moon, like the moon attacking the Earth, basically.
Not falling, attacking the Earth.
Attacking, like I'm not even joking. Like that's literally what happens in the movie. It's such a juvenile, like middle schooler concept for a movie that for me it puts a grin on my face because it's just so stupid. But like, it comes off as being more interesting than other movies that I've watched recently. And like I would certainly give fair exception to the most recent Spider-Man movie. Like there's I have my points of where it feels like it's just a giant MIT advertisement, but overall it's a good premise. It uses the premise extremely well. And thematically, it's just done really well. Like it's a well-made movie and it's an original idea within Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, that's sort of stretching the idea of originality to a certain extent.
Without a doubt, it's the best, most recent Spider-Man movie because they tried something new. The idea of the old Spider-Man coming back is, you know what I mean? Like that has never been seen before in a movie, and that's pretty interesting. And it had heart. I don't know if you actually saw the movie yet. Did you?
I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so, and I think it's funny because I complain about it being an MIT advertisement, but part of it is that it actually does deal with the themes overall of Spider-Man really well because Spider-Man's like a scientific superhero. His origins are born out of like science experiments and all this other stuff. Peter Parker as a character is a scientist. So obviously the thing that would cause him a lot of distress in his life is magic, right? So bring in Doctor Strange, and from that comes all of his like all the chaos that now enters his life, right?
Yeah. And he uses science to beat it, especially when they're in the mirror dimension. He starts doing math to figure out how to beat it. And that's what's interesting about it. He doesn't do that shit in the other two movies. He doesn't do it at all. He doesn't do any kind of math while he's in the middle of a fight, which would have been great. Right. Like that's interesting
what makes the movie so good is it acknowledges the character from like bottom up, right? It's holistic, basically.
And so let me ask you this. Now, this is going back to the whole idea of selling out, but if Roland Emmerich hadn't demanded to do, I don't know if he demanded it, but if he hadn't made the movie in Roland Emmerich style, if he hadn't made $140 million movie, if he had made Moonfall for 50 mil, would he been able, you've seen the movie, I have not, would he have been able to pull off the same movie under 50 mil?
That's a great question because I don't understand enough like the budgetary restrictions that go into like big special effects movies. Like how much of that budget is special effects and how much of that budget is hiring Halle Berry? I have no clue.
That's
because
true,
she's the only named actor or the only recognizably named actor in the whole movie. So like the budget must have gone into the special effects.
Right, but they make Pixar movies for how much? Like 30 million, 80 million, somewhere in that range? Like it doesn't cost nearly that much.
Yeah.
And some of those things look glorious and they're 100% CGI. Like it's boggling to me that much money was spent on the film.
Yeah,
and
it is boggling.
When you have something that is so clearly a B movie, right? Because that's what it is. It's a B movie.
Yeah.
You're supposed to weigh that risk. Like it's not news that these movies don't make money, especially in fucking February.
Right.
Like the time of year you release something is very very important.
It's definitely a summer movie.
Yeah.
It's definitely a summer blockbuster movie. I don't know how it's crazy to me.
If that movie came out on July 4th, it would not have pulled in 700K on previews. It would have pulled in at least 6 million, probably. Yeah. Like,
no, that's in the 90s. That would have been one of the movies that you watch after you watch whatever the biggest movie of that summer was going to be. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like after you watch Men in Black or something, that would be the next one you would go see.
Exactly. You're at the drive-thru and that's the second movie tonight. Like the second movie's Moonfall, and it's purposely a shitty movie because halfway through when the kids have fallen asleep and you realize you want to go home, you can just drive away and not feel bad about it. Like that's the point of it. So you're not really making a movie that should cost $140 million. That was the problem with Moonfall. It's not that it's necessarily a bad movie or anything like that. It is what it is. But to spend $140 million on production and then you go by the general rule of thumb, which is double that budget, and that's what the advertising is. I don't think they spent $140 million on advertising for this because I barely heard of it until I heard
I don't
that it
know how
flopped.
anybody heard about it. I don't know how I heard about it. It just kind of popped up on Twitter one day. I was like, oh, wait, what is this? And Twitter advertising is not cheap, but it's not that expensive either.
No, it's not $140 million. Absolutely not. But then you look at something like Scream, the most recent one, right? They had a production budget of $25 million. That's pretty modest. And if you think about it, they weighed it against the last movie's budget, or the last movie's gross, which I think was about 40 mil. Okay. Right? So they invested a little bit more into it than if you doubled the budget, right? So it would have been about 50 million for production and then advertising. I do believe they've spent quite a bit on advertising because I saw things where they were posted all over Times Square, and that shit is second to Super Bowl advertising. Like there's, you know what I mean? Getting that thing on a billboard in Times Square for 30 seconds costs more than our college educations combined. So that to me, like that they made that bet on it, and now it's made over $100 million. Like nice. if they had made Scream 4 for $140 million, they'd still be in the fucking hole for it right now. And it'd be like, well, why did you do that? Like you should know how much this is going to make now. How much did the last Roland Emmerich movie make? What was the grand total? What was the last movie he made?
Was that
2012?
Or the day after tomorrow? I can't. Or was it Olympus Has Fallen?
No, I think it was Independence Day 2.
Oh, that's right. I haven't actually seen it.
Don't do it.
It's that bad?
Don't do it. It's so bad. All right, let's see. His last. Oh my God, they're redoing Stargate.
No, I don't want that.
Yeah, they're doing it. Oh, he's credited as the writer. That's not good. Okay. Oh no, never mind. He is directing it.
Well, at least he's directing it.
Oh boy. Okay. Anyway, his last movie before Moonfall was Midway. which I think was an airplane movie.
Yeah, it's a World War II movie. I didn't realize he did Midway.
Yeah, he did. And then the one before that was, we're going to omit Midway because that's not a end of the world disaster movie.
Yeah.
But Independence Day Resurgence is, right? So
right.
Let's see how much Independence Day Resurgence made. It made $389 million, almost $340 million. And the budget was 165. So what's 165 times 2? Times 2. 330. How much did we say it made?
I think you said 365.
So it made about 30 extra million dollars, maybe. So not exactly a hit.
Yeah.
Not exactly a flop, but not that great. That's not, yeah. And Midway, I don't know how much did that movie make.
That was not a particularly big movie.
No, not only because it's a World War II movie, but it's a CGI World War II movie, and I don't know how you go. I don't know how you think of that. Made a box office of 126 million. So if they're making Moonfall for 140, I don't know. Even then, you look at the Midway numbers, and you're like, I don't know how you get there. I don't know how you get there. It's very baffling to me, but I don't know. I guess he was not selling out. Maybe he wanted to blame the Marvel movies. You saw that, right?
Oh, I didn't see that.
Roland Emmerich blamed the failure of Moonfall before Moonfall even came out on studio and audiences relying on franchise movies. Okay. He said people won't go to it unless it's a franchise movie anymore. And I think that's horseshit because I can't.
Just make a good movie. There are still movies that are not franchise movies that do well.
Right. And then people talk about them. And then more people go see them.
Yeah.
And that's how you make a good movie. I don't know. Anyway, we're over time. Any thoughts or comments you'd like to throw out there before we wrap up about selling out?
I think I'm out. I can't think of any other thoughts in regards to this. I feel like we've covered it pretty thoroughly. I guess the only other thing that I could say is, like, as an artist, you know, going back to how I felt in regards to David Bowie, it's like, just show up at the table. It doesn't not everything has to be a home run. You're going to have flops, but so long as the flops aren't cynical and aren't lazy, like I said, I would rather somebody fail ambitiously than succeed lazily.
Yeah.
That's just
reach for the top of the tree instead of the low-hanging fruit. Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. I think that's all there is to be said about it. So I don't think selling out is taking an existing IP. I don't think selling out is getting a whole bunch of money. I think selling out is getting safe. And you know what I mean? Safe for the safety of whatever. But I think artists' obligation is to explore, whether it's going inward or outward. You got to keep moving and you got to keep trying and you got to keep, and that's the thing, is staying humble. And like I said, that artist depression and self-doubt can be a good thing in small doses.
Sure.
It can be a good thing. So hold on to that. Don't let your ego get bigger than yourself, and you'll keep trying. You know what I mean? You'll keep trying to do new things and explore and find things. And that's how you don't sell out. That's all I got to say.
Amen to that.
Good night, everybody.